What we're looking at here is a massive collision. You've got the promise of this sleek, frictionless digital future cooked up in Silicon Valley on one side, and on the other, you have the ancient, unyielding reality of the Arctic. This is the story of what happens when these huge techno-utopian dreams run smack into a sovereign nation that refuses to be a blank canvas.
It sounds like something straight out of science fiction, right? What if you could just reboot society? Start completely fresh? It's the ultimate thought experiment, but for some of the most powerful people in the tech world, this is a very, very real goal. And look, this isn't just some fringe idea from a forgotten corner of the internet. We're talking about some of the most influential figures in tech who are seriously proposing this. They kind of see traditional government as a bug, not a feature, and they're convinced they've designed a better operating system for society. So what is a digital nation anyway? Well, think of it like government as a service. It would provide all the things we kind of take for granted from a government, digital IDs, online ways to resolve disputes. But here's the key. Its legitimacy isn't based on land or history. Nope, it's based entirely on how well it performs and whether people voluntarily choose to join. This quote from Peter Thiel just perfectly captures that whole tech-centric worldview. He's basically arguing that if a system works better and people choose to be part of it, then it's more legitimate than a system that just exists because of tradition or paperwork. It's a pretty radical idea, legitimacy as a performance metric. But there's always a catch, isn't there? Even a nation that lives online needs a physical home. You still need land for data centers, for housing, for ports. The entire vision really hinges on finding a totally blank canvas somewhere to paint this new future onto. And this right here is where the whole beautiful, clean concept just slams headfirst into the real world. Because that so-called blank canvas, it's almost never actually blank. It's already somebody's home. So let's talk about Greenland. This is not a thought experiment. It's not a whiteboard. It's a sovereign nation with its own rich history, a vibrant culture, and its own laws. It is, in fact, the absolute opposite of a blank slate. You see, Greenland's reality is defined by hard facts, not abstract theories. Greenlanders are a recognized people with the right to self-determination, and that's written into their Self-Government Act. And maybe most importantly, they have this long, often painful history of outsiders looking at their home and seeing nothing more than a strategic asset on a map. And then you hear this from Greenlandic leader Jens Fredrik Nielsen, and it's just the perfect counterpoint. He's saying legitimacy isn't some feature you can just code and deploy. It's a living, breathing relationship, one that's forged over generations between a people, their culture, and their land. So what this sets up is a fundamental conflict. We have two completely opposing ideas of what makes a nation real. And in Greenland, those two ideas are on a direct collision course. And right here, you can see that divide in really sharp relief. On the left, the digital nation view treats legitimacy like a product, right? It's all about efficiency, choice, solving problems. But the Greenlandic view on the right, well, that sees legitimacy as something that has to be earned. It's rooted in the consent of the people, their shared history, and their fundamental right to choose their own future. And then, bam, Sarah Olsvig comes in with a question that just cuts through all that abstract talk. When you hear people talking about good outcomes, she asks the most essential follow-up. Who actually benefits? And who's being asked to bear the risk? It's a question that brings the focus right back to the actual people whose lives are on the line. Now, this whole abstract debate gets dangerously real when we start talking about resources. See, Greenland is sitting on a potential treasure trove of critical minerals, the very things that could be the key to its full economic independence. But that potential wealth comes at a steep and very uncertain price. I mean, Greenland is basically walking a razor's edge here. The promise is huge: jobs, revenue, a real path to independence from Danish subsidies. But the peril is just as great. You're talking about potential environmental destruction, deep social division, and the very real risk of just trading one form of dependence for another. This is such a powerful local perspective. It doesn't matter what fancy geopolitical label you put on it, whether you call it the green transition or securing supply chains. If the people who actually live there feel like they're just being asked to absorb all the risk for someone else's benefit, that doesn't feel like progress. It feels a lot more like sacrifice. So it all really boils down to this, doesn't it? Are these new proposals about empowering Greenland with genuine agency over its own future? Or are they just a 21st century version of annexation, all wrapped up in the slick language of tech and progress.
A really helpful way to understand this whole conflict is to think of it as three competing stories all happening at the same time. First, you've got the sovereignty story. Greenland is a people, not a platform to be built on. Second, the strategy story. The world's geopolitics and fierce competition demand speed. And third, the platform story. This core belief that tech and capital can simply build a better system from the outside in. The real problem starts when one of those stories tries to completely erase the others. So, with all these grand plans flying around, how do we evaluate them? Well, here's a simple but incredibly powerful test you can apply. First, does it respect Greenland's agency and consent right from the very start? Second, does it actually acknowledge the real-world geopolitical pressures? Third, does it address actual physical needs, power, internet cables, security? And finally, the bottom line, does it give Greenlanders more choice over their future or less? At the end of the day, the crucial point is this. It's not about the fancy vocabulary. It doesn't matter if you call them digital nations or acceleration zones. It's about power. Does a plan actually shift power into the hands of the local people, or does it just put a new, tech-savvy face on a very, very old story of outside influence? And that leaves us with the ultimate question, the one we should be asking of any project that promises progress, whether it's in the Arctic or anywhere else. Is this plan designed to expand a people's choices and their power to shape their own home, or is it really just designed to take that choice away?